Welcome to the place where the things no one dares to say are spoken word by word. I'm your guide, a relentlessly curious guy in a tin hat, holding a stack of files marked top secret that somehow ended up on the internet. But hey, if it's all just fiction, then why would anyone try to stop you from watching this video? So what do you think? Are aliens real? I used to believe aliens only existed in Hollywood movies, those big green guys flying around in saucers, getting shot down by the US military in the middle of the desert. But that was before I saw a 3,000-year-old carving in Abydos, Egypt, shaped like a helicopter, a jet plane, even what looked like a spaceship. I'm American. I grew up in the age of technology and skepticism, so my first reaction was, probably just a coincidence. Until I stumbled across the stone statues of Easter Island, the carvings of the ancient Sumerians, and the massive Nazca Lines in Peru, each one showing details that, for their time, should have been impossible. And then I started wondering, what if aliens did visit Earth? Not in movies, but in our ancient history. If that's true, then everything we know about the history of mankind might need to be rewritten. My name is Jack Turner. I'm 41 years old. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, not too far from the legendary land of Roswell. When I was a kid, my dad worked as an engineer for a military contractor near Groom Lake. Yeah, the same Area 51 you've heard about online. But he never said much. Only once did he tell me, there are things in this world you're not allowed to know. Doesn't matter if you're an American citizen, pay your taxes, or served in the military. And that sentence haunted me for years. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a professional journalist. I'm just an average American guy used to drive cross-country trucks, fix satellite dishes for folks in rural towns, and maybe stood alone in the Nevada desert at 2 a.m. and saw something I couldn't explain. I'm not here to convince you to believe in UFOs or aliens. I just want you to take a journey with me. From ancient carvings in stone to mysteries no one can explain, until we're left asking, did our ancestors really build all of this alone? If you're ready, then stick with me, because from here on out, things are about to get even harder to believe. We, Americans, pride ourselves on technology, science, and logic. But sometimes, that pride keeps us from asking the questions that don't have answers. I used to think the pyramids were no big deal. The Egyptians had labor, had time, so they just stacked the stones and built them. Then I found out each stone weighs over 2.5 tons. And they had to transport 2.3 million of them from quarries miles away, with no wheels, no steel, no cranes. And the deeper I dug, the more I found that civilizations thousands of miles apart, no contact, no internet, described something eerily similar. Beings from the sky, gods who brought light, technology, and knowledge of construction. In Peru, giant lines that can only be seen from the air. In India, a statue of a god flying in what looks like a spaceship. In Mexico, the Mayans drew a pilot sitting in a cockpit. How did people who never met, never shared culture or language, all end up with the same image? That's when I started to wonder. Maybe they saw the same thing. Maybe we haven't been alone for a very long time. And the thing that keeps me up at night is, if that's true, why isn't it in our history books? Who decides what we're allowed to learn? And why are these strange pieces of evidence always labeled pseudoscience? This isn't just a story about aliens. It's a story about truth and who's hiding it. It all started in a place no one would expect. The ancient Vedic texts of India, over 3,000 years ago. I'm not religious, but when I read a translation of the Mahabharata, an ancient epic, I came across descriptions of something they called the Vimana, a flying metal craft that could travel through the sky and underwater, even take part in sky battles with sparks, smoke, and thunderous roars. An ancient religious book, but it reads like a battlefield report straight out of the Pentagon. From there, I started flipping everything we call mythology on its head. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings from the sky who created humans from clay and gave them divine knowledge. The ancient Egyptians carved figures with bird heads, dog heads, standing next to pyramid-like structures we still don't fully understand. And what chilled me most was, whether you're in Egypt, Peru, Cambodia, or Turkey, there's a striking similarity. All the greatest civilizations believed that knowledge, architecture, astronomy, even reincarnation wasn't something humans invented. It was given to them from above. I remember the first time I stood in front of a Moai statue on Easter Island. Not on TV, but in person. Those stone figures tower 30 feet high, weigh tons, and were placed upright hundreds of years ago, by methods no one can explain. And they all face the ocean, as if they're waiting for something to return. And it wasn't just them. The Maya, the Aztecs, the Khmer. They all vanished suddenly without a clear trace, almost as if their role had been fulfilled. So if aliens did visit Earth, when did they come? Why were they here? And what did they leave behind? I no longer see myself as a skeptic. I began this journey as an investigator. And in the next chapter, I'll take you to the very first stop. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the greatest riddle history has ever left behind. I flew into Cairo on a scorching day in August, close to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the heat nearly melting the soles off my sneakers. But nothing could prepare me for that moment when I stood before the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure still claimed to be built by ancient farmers using ropes and raw manpower. I looked up at its peak, over 480 feet tall. Millions of stone blocks, each weighing close to 5,000 pounds, stacked with a precision so exact, it felt like someone used a laser to line them up. The sides of the base differ by less than 2 inches, a level of precision that would keep a NASA engineering team up at night. So I asked my local guide, how did they transport the stones from Aswan, over 500 miles away, without wheels? He shrugged and gave a quiet smile. That's something the whole world is still trying to understand. But I didn't stop there. I brought along a magnetic field reader, the kind amateur archaeologists in the US use to detect metal or energy disturbances. Right at the center of the pyramid, the needle flickered and danced wildly. None of my batteries were leaking, but something powerful was emanating from within the structure itself. A giant block of stone, giving off a magnetic signal? That's also where I met Ahmed, an Egyptian archaeologist who spent more than 20 years studying the pyramids. When I asked him about the alien theory, he just smiled. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. All he said was, there are ancient inscriptions we're not allowed to release, because too many questions would be asked, and very few answers are allowed to be given. That trip didn't give me absolute proof, but it did something even more important. It shattered the idea that everything we've been taught is the whole truth. And as any good investigator will tell you, if a witness stays silent, head to the next scene. I left Cairo with more questions than when I arrived. But I didn't stop. My next step, Peru. A place where mysteries can only be seen from the sky. Peru greeted me with thin air and a sky so intensely blue, it didn't seem real. I landed in Lima, then caught another flight south, to the Nazca region. From the ground, it looked like nothing special. A dry desert, gray rocks, no trees, no people. But I wasn't here to see it from the ground. I rented a small 2-seater Cessna plane, flown by a local pilot named Luis. He'd flown over the desert more than 500 times, and he told me, when you see them, you'll never believe what the textbooks say again. And he was right. When the plane lifted to about 1,500 feet, I looked down and went silent. A massive bird, with wings stretching nearly 1,000 feet across, drawn by removing just the top layer of rock to expose the white earth below. A spider, a monkey, a human figure, all drawn with flawless proportions that modern engineers would need software and surveys to match. And then there were the lines, miles long, perfectly straight, slicing through the desert as if etched by lasers. I asked Luis, who made these? And more importantly, why would they create something they couldn't see from the ground? He shrugged. Some say it was to worship the sun, but I've never believed that. Back on the ground, I walked along one of the carvings. Just a few feet away, I couldn't see anything, just a shallow trench in the dust. These drawings only make sense from the sky. And that's when the question hit me like a brick. Who was watching from above? If the ancient Nazca people lived entirely on the ground, no planes, no balloons, no observatories, then why create something only visible from the air? A local archaeologist, Maria Torres, told me gently but firmly. We're not sure they did it for religion. Maybe they were guided to do it. Guided by whom? I left Nazca with a weight in my chest. Not from the altitude, but from the realization that for the first time in my life, the evidence wasn't just theory. It was right there, beneath my feet. And I knew, if there was ever a place touched by something not from this world, the next stop had to be Easter Island, where giant stone eyes stare endlessly toward the sea. I'm sitting alone in a small wooden room in the town of Hongaroa, Easter Island. Outside, the ocean wind howls through the rocky fields, whispering through the night like voices from long ago. Inside me, a battle. I've seen the pyramids with my own eyes. I've flown over the Nazca Lines and witnessed shapes that defy explanation. And now I'm in a place where over 900 stone statues, up to 30 feet tall and nearly 80 tons, were raised by a people with no wheels, no metal, no modern tools. So why is there still a part of me that doubts? Maybe it's because I'm American. I grew up believing in science, in evidence, in things that could be measured in inches, pounds, and degrees Fahrenheit. In school, I was taught about evolution, history, engineering, all of it neat, logical, clean like a technical blueprint. There was no room for aliens, mysterious artifacts, or intelligence beyond Earth. So now, when I've seen things with my own eyes that can't be explained by basic scientific knowledge, who am I supposed to believe? I called my wife back home in Colorado. I told her about Nazca, about the magnetic anomalies in Giza. But when I mentioned the possibility that maybe someone or something once came from beyond Earth, she went quiet for a long moment. I think maybe you're going too far, she finally said. Don't let this stuff distract you from reality. I understood her. I used to think the same way. And that's exactly where the deepest conflict inside me began. How do I stay grounded when what I'm discovering feels like something out of a sci-fi movie? But then, I looked out the window. The Moai statues stood silent under the moonlight, all of them facing the ocean, as if waiting for someone to return. And I asked myself, if I turn my back, like millions of people are doing, am I betraying the truth? Maybe I won't find all the answers. But one thing I know for sure: silence, doubt, and sarcasm have never been valid proof against the truth. And that's why I keep going, even if it means standing alone. I never thought a morning hike on Easter Island would lead me to a turning point. I was following a rarely used trail, heading to the northern part of the island, where a few forgotten Moai lay face down in the dirt, as if asleep. No tourists, no voices, just the wind, the waves, and the sound of my own footsteps. Then I saw it. A crack between two massive basalt stones, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Curious, I grabbed my flashlight and crouched inside. It was a natural cave. The smell of damp rock and earth hit me like a wall. I followed the wall for a few minutes, until I reached a larger chamber, where the ceiling sloped down onto a flat rock, carved with deep markings. They didn't look like any Moai carvings I'd seen before. Not religious symbols. Not depictions of people or animals. They looked like technical diagrams. A large circle with 3 interlocking ellipses. Fine lines, etched with millimeter precision. And something that looked unmistakably like a spacecraft. I froze, staring. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That's when I heard footsteps, and a deep, clear voice speaking English. "You're not supposed to be here." I turned around. An older man stood in the entrance, wearing local clothing, but his presence wasn't ordinary. His eyes were sharp, not threatening, but intensely serious. "I'm just exploring," I said. "I didn't damage anything." He was quiet for a few seconds, then let out a slow sigh. "Not everyone sees those drawings," he said. "Most people just walk past. But if you've seen them, then you have the right to know." He told me about a group of local people, called Kawirunga, which means the Watchers from Above. According to ancient legend, their ancestors didn't come from this place. They were brought here from a distant star. "The Moai statues aren't just statues," he said. "They're signal pillars facing the sky. That's why they all look out to the sea. They're waiting for the return." I asked, "Who's they? Aliens?" He just said, Ancestors never abandon their descendants. They're just waiting for the right time. I don't have scientific proof to confirm his story, but I have the photos I took of those symbols in the cave. And I know they're not random. On the flight out of Easter Island, I looked through the plane window, watching the stone statues disappear beneath the clouds. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't just asking questions now. I was beginning to believe that there really were answers, and that someone was trying very hard to hide them. When I got back to the US, I brought with me the photos, the notes, and above all, the feeling that I just stepped into a world I never thought was real. I live in Boulder, Colorado, a peaceful place with mountains, coffee shops, and friends who are engineers, teachers, climate scientists. A place where if you say, "I think aliens may have visited Earth," people look at you like you've been binging too many Netflix documentaries at 2 a.m. But I don't care anymore. I printed out the cave carvings from Easter Island, enlarged maps of the Nazca Lines, and pinned everything to my office wall, like a detective board in a crime show. Red strings connecting Giza to Peru, Easter Island to the ancient ruins in Turkey I'd once read about. Göbekli Tepe, home to T-shaped stone pillars weighing dozens of tons, built over 11,000 years ago. How did they move those stones? No wheels, no engines. Everything defies the logic I was taught in school. I started digging into documents from NASA, the CIA, even declassified records from the Department of Defense. And that's when I found something. An old report, dated March 23, 1964, from Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official program for investigating unidentified flying objects. It described an unusual light phenomenon over the Nazca Desert, recorded as a linear trajectory, steady movement, completely silent, and disappeared abruptly. Couldn't believe it. A government document confirming the presence of an unidentified object, right above the carvings I had just seen with my own eyes. I called an old friend, Chris, who now works with a private aerospace research group. I sent him the photos of the technical-looking engravings I'd found in the cave. A few days later, he called me back, his voice noticeably lower. "I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but those markings, they look a lot like torsion energy models used in magnetic propulsion theory. They're not prehistoric." "You're saying they're modern?" "Not exactly, but definitely not just random rock carvings." For the first time, I didn't feel like some conspiracy-obsessed weirdo chasing UFOs. I was an American citizen, protected by the law to seek the truth. And I was starting to realize, if what I'd seen was real, then maybe we had made contact a long time ago, and somehow it had been erased from official history. A week after hearing back from Chris, I got a strange phone call. The voice on the other end was calm. No hesitation. "I know you're searching for the truth, and I can help you." He didn't need to say who I was or what I'd been doing. That voice knew every step I'd taken, every document I'd read, every conversation I'd had. "My name's Jack," he said. "I've been watching what you're doing. You won't be alone on this journey, but you have to trust me." I cut him off. "Who are you? What do you want?" "All I want is for you to stay on the right path." I couldn't take it anymore. I'd been on this road too long to just blindly follow vague promises. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've seen what you haven't. And if you really want the truth, you need to know who you're looking for and what they've done." The next day, I met Jack at a small cafe in Washington, D.C., just like he'd asked. He wasn't some government agent or a guy selling wild theories on the internet. He wore plain clothes, had a cold, unreadable face, but his eyes were intense, like he'd seen things the rest of us couldn't imagine. "You think you're looking for aliens?" he said with a crooked smile. "You're not. You're looking for memories that were erased." Then he started talking. He didn't share much about himself, but what he said, about hidden research, suppressed findings, clues I'd overlooked, sent chills down my spine. Jack was part of an unofficial research group, operating outside any government oversight. They had been tracking alien-related incidents, UFOs, and unexplained phenomena for decades. Everything they did was in the shadows. No paper trails, no public records. "They all know," Jack told me. "The government, the powerful institutions, they all know. But they don't want you to know. I couldn't fully grasp everything Jack said, but his words struck deep. This wasn't a game. He mentioned names I'd never heard before, connected to major historical events the public was never told the full truth about. When you look at the symbols in Nazca, Giza, or Easter Island, you need to see beyond what you've been taught. It's not just some ancient civilization. It's a signal, a sign that we once connected with a civilization from beyond Earth. Jack's words hit me like a tidal wave. He wasn't just talking about UFO sightings. He was talking about a hidden network. People who knew the truth, but never dared to speak up. Then he said, "If you want to know more, you need to go to the next location. That's where everything will start to make sense. But you need to be ready, because once you go down this path, there's no turning back." I nodded, said nothing. I knew it was time to move forward. There was no going back anymore. I never thought my life would take this kind of turn. After meeting Jack, I knew I was caught in something much bigger than I'd imagined. This wasn't just some thrilling story I'd stumbled into. It was a hidden truth, carefully guarded by forces far more powerful than I'd expected. Jack took me to a secret location, deep in the Nevada wilderness. Somewhere I knew I'd never find solid evidence easily. It was an abandoned house, one of the former bases of a research team that had supposedly been shut down by the government years ago. I parked my car, stepped out, and Jack was already there, standing beneath a tree, staring directly at me. He didn't speak, just motioned for me to follow him inside. As I crossed the threshold, I realized this wasn't just any old house. It looked forgotten, but it was strangely well preserved. Notebooks, classified research files, carefully organized folders still sat on the desk, untouched by time. "This is where it all started," Jack said as I stepped into the room. It was official, but almost no one knew about it. The government erased every trace. But here, some things survived. The things they couldn't destroy. I bent down to look at one of the documents. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Chris. "Be careful. They're watching you." A chill ran down my spine. At the same time, a strange noise came from outside the door. I glanced out the window and saw a black car, no license plate, parked just across the road. A man stepped out. He looked like some kind of security agent. "We have to go," Jack said sharply. His face had gone pale. "Right now." There was no time to explain. We burst through the back door. I thought we had escaped, but the black car was already there, blocking the rear exit. "We can't stop. Follow me," Jack urged. We ran through the wild forest, my heart pounding. Just like Jack said, everything was spinning out of control. We weren't just up against a secret research group anymore. We were facing a shadow force that wouldn't let anyone get close to the truth. I didn't fully understand why, but when I saw that black car, I realized this wasn't just regular government surveillance. This was something much bigger. "Jack, who's after us?" I asked. "No one but the people who don't want you to know the truth." Then he added, "There are people who'll do anything to keep this secret. If you want to keep going, you have to understand, there's no turning back." After a tense chase through the woods, we found a rundown motel tucked in the Nevada mountains, a safe place to hide for now. Exhausted and shaken, I tried to breathe, to calm myself down. "We're close," Jack said with steady certainty, like he'd known this would happen all along. "If we can survive the night tomorrow, you'll have your answers." But I couldn't wait that long. The feeling that the truth was right in front of me wouldn't let me rest. Too many signs, too much buried information I could no longer ignore. The name Göbekli Tepe, the strange markings in Nazca, and especially the metal discs I'd found back at the research house. All of it pointed to one thing: we had been visited by extraterrestrials. I reached out to the table, and the light from the lamp flickered. That's when Jack came over and handed me a thick folder. "These files aren't everything," he said, opening a page, "but they're part of what they couldn't erase." He showed me research conducted after the events at Giza and Nazca, the reason they tried so hard to wipe out the evidence. I looked at the computer-printed pages, full of charts and complex diagrams. One of them made me stop cold. It was a geometric map, circles and intersecting lines like a star chart. It matched the patterns I'd seen carved into ancient ruins, just like the images depicting UFOs in ancient artwork. "This is the code," Jack explained. "A way to transmit a message." They couldn't say it outright, so they buried it in symbols and geometry. I could barely believe my eyes. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The symbols I'd studied at Nazca, the stone carvings on Easter Island, the colossal structures in Giza, they all pointed to a specific mark, a message encrypted over centuries. "So what is it?" "A map," I asked, my voice shaking. "Yes, a map that leads to a place. A location where everything will become clear. This is the truth they're trying to hide." "And who's going there?" "We are." Felt like I had fallen into a hole I couldn't climb out of. This information would change everything, not just for me, but for the world. If I followed through with what Jack said, if I went to that place, I might uncover a truth buried for thousands of years. "This is the biggest decision of my life," I told myself. But in that moment, a strange noise came from outside the window. I turned to Jack, his eyes held no doubt. "They're here." I didn't need to ask who. It was them, the ones who'd worked so hard to bury the truth. The final confrontation was near. Everything happened fast. The window lit up with headlights from the cars outside. Engines roared, breaking the silence of the motel. My heart raced as I peeked through the curtain. Just like Jack said, they were here. "We don't have much time," Jack whispered. "They won't stop. We only have one choice, go. Now." I looked back at him, but the fear was gone. We were too far in to quit. Everything I discovered, all the clues and evidence, they made one thing clear. Someone didn't want the world to know the truth. And now I had to face them, those who had hidden it for far too long. "What do we do?" I asked, bracing for the worst. "Run," Jack said, simple and firm. "And once we're out, we don't look back." We bolted through the back door, running like fugitives. The cars had blocked all exits. Men in black stepped out with guns and electronic gear. Felt like a nightmare. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. "Stop!" one of them yelled. But Jack and I didn't slow down. We ran into the forest, where Jack had hidden a vehicle in advance. As we sprinted through the woods, I could feel the breath of death brushing past me. Each step was a battle against time. Jack moved fast, silent. Clearly no stranger to situations like this. But just as we reached the car, something unexpected happened. One of the black vehicles pulled up right in front of us, cutting us off. The doors opened and a man stepped out. It wasn't one of the pursuers. It was someone I knew, Chris, my old friend. "Chris," I gasped, barely believing it. He looked at me, a faint, weary smile on his face. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said. "But we can't keep going. They'll kill us if we don't stop." "Chris, what are you doing here?" I asked, feeling a sudden sting of betrayal. "Because I have to be," he said. "This has gone too far. The truth you found, it's too dangerous. If you don't stop now, I won't be able to protect you anymore." Jack stepped forward, his voice cold and firm. "You don't get it. We're this close to the truth. Don't you want to know?" Chris didn't answer right away. He just shook his head, his expression heavy. "Don't. If he keeps going, you and your family will be in danger. I'm just trying to keep you safe." Couldn't believe it. My best friend was siding with them, the very forces I'd been fighting against all week. "We have to go," Jack said, his voice resolute. "If we don't, we'll never know the truth." "So what do we do now?" I asked, knowing there was no turning back. Jack turned to me, locking eyes. "We touch the truth, no matter the cost." And with that, the final confrontation began. The whole world stood on the edge of a revelation, and I had no choice but to move forward. We stood facing each other, the faint glow of headlights cutting through the darkness of the forest. My heart pounded like never before. Everything felt frozen in time as Chris stepped closer, his eyes filled with tension. "Don't you see?" he said, his voice strained. "This isn't about us anymore. If you keep going, there's no way back." But I couldn't stop. It was too late for that. I'd seen too many signs, uncovered too many clues. The ancient drawings, the alien traces in historical ruins. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. Extraterrestrials had visited Earth in ancient times. And now I was closer than ever. "We've come too far to stop now," I said, steady and sure. "I have to know." Jack looked at me, then turned to Chris. He gave a slow nod like he finally understood. "Fine. Let him see it. He has the right to know." Chris let out a long sigh. A cold wind swept through the clearing. There was no turning back now. The story wasn't just what I'd imagined. It was a struggle between unimaginable powers and the few who dared to uncover the truth. "Follow me," Chris said, turning toward the car. Jack and I followed silently. We drove down deserted roads, weaving through dark hills, until we reached a massive gate protected by heavy security. It was an unofficial military base, one that had hidden the truth for decades. A place not found on any map, with no trace of its existence, but filled with secrets that could change the world. Chris led us inside. Harsh neon lights illuminated the vast interior. Advanced machinery, monitors flashing with data and strange images. I couldn't make sense of it all. "This is where they conduct the research," Chris said, scanning the displays. "Where it all began." We went deeper until we finally reached a special room. Chris pressed a button on the wall, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with old documents and strange artifacts. There were shiny metal discs, fragments of spacecraft, and bizarre maps. Some of the images looked just like the ancient murals I had studied, depicting astronauts and spacecraft. "This is where they keep everything," Chris said. "Everything you've been looking for. It's all here." I couldn't believe my eyes. Everything, from the Nazca Lines to the markings on the pyramids, was finally making sense. Aliens had come to Earth in ancient times, and this room held the proof, gathered through secret experiments and hidden research. "So these things," I said, my voice trailing off. "They're real," Jack answered. "They helped humanity progress, but they couldn't let the world know. If people found out, everything would change." A wave of emotion surged through me. This truth was bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. The clues left behind weren't random. The aliens had visited, leaving breadcrumbs, a compass for future seekers like me to follow. But the question still lingered. Why did they come? And could we really face the truth? The room was silent. Even the hum of the machines faded into the background. I could hear my own breathing, feel the weight of history pressing down. The documents, the star maps, the ancient signs, they all swirled in my mind. Everything I'd believed about history, about this world, had just been turned upside down. But I couldn't just stand there. I couldn't simply know the truth without acting on it. I turned to Jack, then to Chris. Both men were silent, their eyes filled with worry and hope. "So, what do we do now?" I asked, my voice raw. "We know everything, but if this information gets out, everything will change. And not in a good way." Chris walked over to a nearby table, picked up a small metal box, and placed it in front of me. "This is your decision," he said. "Inside this box is a document, something that could change the world. But if you choose to release it, nothing will ever be the same." I stared at the box, a heavy knot forming in my chest. This wasn't just a box filled with paper. It was filled with power. The power to launch the world into a new era, or to bury the truth and shield humanity from what it wasn't ready to face. "You can keep it," Jack said, his voice low and serious. "Live a normal life. Or you can release it, and the world will never be the same again." I suddenly remembered the ancient drawings I had studied. Images of beings that resembled astronauts in spacesuits, massive spacecraft soaring across the skies, strange markings on the pyramids, carvings on stones in Nazca and Easter Island. These all pointed to some kind of extraterrestrial intervention in the development of humankind. But this truth could also throw the world into chaos. We would be forced to confront a seismic shift in our understanding of religion, of science, of our very existence. And the question loomed. Are we, as a species, ready to face a truth this immense? "We can't keep this hidden forever," I said, my voice still uncertain. "One day this truth will come out, and when it does, will we be able to handle the consequences?" Chris and Jack didn't answer right away. They knew, just as I did, that this wasn't just a personal decision. It was one that could shape the future of humanity. Finally, Jack spoke. If you decide to reveal this, there's no going back. But if you keep it to yourself, you can't live in silence forever either. The truth always finds a way. I looked at the box. Part of me wanted to keep it all hidden, to protect the world from panic, from crisis. But another part of me, the part that had always longed for answers, that couldn't turn away from the truth, urged me to share it. Because I knew, deep down, that only the truth could set us free from fear and doubt. At last, I reached out and opened the box. Inside was a classified document, along with a gleaming metal disc. It was etched with strange symbols, the same ones I had seen in ancient artwork. This was it. Undeniable proof that extraterrestrials had visited Earth and left their mark on human history. "You've made your choice," Chris said, his voice no longer filled with concern, but with a quiet respect for the decision I had made. "Now you have to face what comes next." I stared at the documents, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had chosen to reveal the truth, but I knew this act would ignite a revolution, not just of knowledge but of power. Were we really ready for what would follow? Then I looked up, determination burning in my eyes. "We're ready. We have to face the truth." The tension still hadn't let me go. In the hours after opening the box, I knew there was no turning back. Once the truth about extraterrestrials went public, not just my life, but the entire world would change forever. And as the information spread, the consequences weren't just limited to academic debates or quiet government discussions. It became a tidal wave, crashing into every aspect of society. On the first day, media outlets rapidly circulated the details of the documents I had revealed. Some people were in utter disbelief. Others felt like their entire worldview had collapsed. News stations aired footage of the ancient civilizations and the alien traces Jack and I had discovered, images of star maps, astronaut-like figures, and artifacts that had defied explanation for centuries. Scientists, political leaders, and religious scholars around the world scrambled to respond. I could feel the fear rippling through humanity. A massive global crisis was unfolding. Protests erupted everywhere. People struggled to accept the truth about their origins. Everything we had built, our culture, our religions, our scientific beliefs, was now being questioned. "We've been lied to for thousands of years," a protester shouted in the streets of New York. "The government hid the truth from us." Panic spread across nations. From Washington, D.C. to Moscow, Beijing to London, governments were faced with questions they couldn't answer. Emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. Military forces were mobilized to contain civil unrest. Major news networks provided round-the-clock coverage of the fallout, ranging from theological crises to debates about global policy shifts. Big questions emerged. Have we been manipulated all along? Are aliens still watching us, influencing our decisions? No one had clear answers, and that uncertainty only fueled the chaos. Meanwhile, those who supported the disclosure were met with intense resistance from powerful institutions. Religious groups claimed that the revelation had shattered the faith of millions. Some believed that this truth would usher in the downfall of civilization. Governments began clamping down on information, trying to control the narrative and protect their authority. Jack and I monitored everything from a distance, glued to every new update. When the press conference was scheduled, I found myself standing before a packed crowd. All eyes were on me. People were waiting, demanding to hear why I had made the choice I did. The questions in my own mind echoed loudly. How do I explain that I've brought the world to a point of no return? What are we supposed to do now? I asked Jack, my voice barely above a whisper in the quiet room. He looked at me, concern written across his face, as if he knew the battle we had stepped into had only just begun. "We opened a door that can't be shut. Now we have to deal with everything that comes through it." My instincts told me to keep speaking, to push humanity forward into this new era. But the fear of what lay ahead gripped me. Had I done the right thing? Could humanity survive the truth I had unleashed? Could we live in a world where everything we thought we knew was now in question? Where belief itself was fractured? There was no going back. A revolution of consciousness had begun. And no one, not even us, knew what the long-term consequences would be. The feeling of being lost crept in. After that earth-shattering revelation, the world I had once known no longer existed. Everything had changed, and I had no idea where to begin. The shockwaves we'd sent through the world had created a crisis not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity. Politics, religion, science, none of it was the same anymore. The world was split. On one side were those who wanted to explore the truth and embrace it. On the other, those who rejected it and tried to deny it. The protests didn't stop. Protests erupted across the world, but not everyone supported the revelation I had made. Many religious organizations declared it a betrayal, insisting that humanity wasn't ready to face the truth. "We can't live in fear forever," I told Jack as we sat in a quiet, hidden room, away from the chaos outside. Dim light glowed from the electronic devices around us, while the weight of anxiety pressed heavily on my chest. "So what are you planning to do?" Jack asked. His voice carried concern, but also a trace of expectation. He didn't ask whether I regretted my decision. He already knew the answer would never be regret. We couldn't turn back, and we'd opened a path that no one could have foreseen. I sat in silence for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. Part of me still wanted to hide, to return to a normal life, but I knew that was no longer possible. I had made a monumental choice, and now I had to live with it. "We need a plan," I said. "We have to help people understand that this truth isn't something to be feared. If we don't, the world will spiral into chaos." Jack nodded, then turned to Chris. "But how do we get that message out?" he asked. "So many people still don't believe, and some just refuse to believe. How do we help them accept this without causing even more disruption?" Chris thought for a moment before responding. "We might not be able to change everyone overnight, but we can start with those who are willing to listen. We need organizations, conferences, spaces for education and dialogue. We can't let fear dominate. We have to give people knowledge, give them context." A plan began to take shape in my mind. No, we couldn't change the world all at once, but maybe, if we started with smaller groups, with those open to the truth, the message could spread. Acceptance required education. I began to consider all the forms of communication we could use to help people understand. Online platforms, global conferences, even books that could clearly explain our discoveries. A worldwide collaboration to study extraterrestrial presence and the history we'd missed. This could be the first step towards something new for all of humanity. Still, I knew not everyone would be ready. We would face massive resistance from powerful institutions, conservative religious groups, even nations with the means to suppress information. But the truth was out. The door had been opened. The only way now was forward. "We'll never be able to convince everyone," I said, looking at both Jack and Chris. "But if we can help some people understand, just a few, that might be enough to start changing the world from the inside out. We have to keep going, no matter what." Chris and Jack both fell silent. They seemed to understand that this was the only path left. Our new mission wasn't just about uncovering more truths. It was about helping the world move through fear and uncertainty into a new era, one where humanity would face greater questions, unexplored wonders, and challenges we'd never imagined. And we, the ones who had exposed the truth, would have to lead this revolution. Even if we failed, even if it cost us everything, we had chosen this path, and we had to walk it no matter how difficult it became. In the days after we announced our plan, a massive wave of reaction surged. It didn't just come from those opposing the revelation. It came from powerful, hidden forces who seemed to have prepared for this moment long ago. Governments, religious organizations, and corporate entities began coordinating efforts to control the flow of information and preserve societal stability. But what shocked me most was the uprising of small groups, people who stood with us. We hadn't anticipated the ferocity of the backlash. As protests intensified around the globe, I found myself swept into a war that wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about control, about power. Global leaders began labeling us a threat to the world order. Still, we couldn't stop. I remembered what Chris had said in one of our private meetings. "If we don't act now, the world will be divided beyond repair." That stuck with me, Not just as a warning, but as a reminder that this wasn't about discovering truth anymore. It was about transforming how humanity understood itself. The resistance wasn't just national. Some religious institutions openly condemned the revelation, claiming it would destroy the faith of millions. They argued that the existence of extraterrestrials was a denial of human creation. These declarations ignited waves of doubt and sparked violent incidents at flashpoints across the world. In some places, legal tensions escalated. Supporters of our cause were prosecuted for spreading panic. Free speech organizations began filing lawsuits. But what worried me more were the covert attacks we began facing, not only from governments but from powerful private entities with deep resources. One evening, as we gathered in a secure room to discuss our next moves, devastating news reached us. A major cyber attack had taken place. Every piece of data we'd collected, every document on extraterrestrial evidence was gone, erased. Our most crucial records, the evidence of ancient structures of alien presence throughout history, had been wiped from the system. "We've been hit," I said, my voice trembling as I turned to Jack. His face had gone pale with fear. "There's no doubt," Jack replied, his hands shaking. "They know what we were about to do, and they can't let the truth reach the light." A wave of frustration rose inside me. We had come too far. And now we were staring down a war, not just over information but over power and control. Hidden forces were working to suppress everything, from knowledge to technology. And they weren't going to let something this seismic survive without a fight. But we had no choice. We couldn't turn back. I had seen too much. And the truth, we all knew, was not something that could be buried forever. Without the truth, we'd be fighting a losing battle. If we couldn't hold on to it, the world would fall back into the shadows of secrets never revealed. "We're not giving up," I said, my voice firm with conviction. "No matter what we face, we'll find a way to protect what we've uncovered and keep moving forward. No one can stop the truth." Chris looked at me, his eyes full of understanding and determination. "You're right. We've stepped into this fight, and now we have to see it through." I knew this wasn't just a battle for truth. It was a battle against powerful forces. Forces that would do whatever it took to keep the world the way it was. Every step we took, every plan we made would be monitored. And we had to be ready to face the unpredictable. By this point, the world around me was unrecognizable. Everything I once thought was certain, beliefs I had built over a lifetime, had been turned upside down. The revelation of extraterrestrial life wasn't just a shockwave through science and politics. It shook the very foundations of what had shaped human society for centuries. After weeks of tension, we finally found a way out. The cyber attack had wiped out all of our critical data, but it reminded us of something essential. We can't rely solely on technology and forget our humanity. The deleted documents were just fragments of a much bigger picture, and that picture couldn't be erased completely. The truth was out there, and even though powerful forces tried to control it, deny it, bury it, it still existed. Humanity couldn't return to a time before these revelations. It was like opening a window and letting sunlight flood a dark room. Whether you wanted to or not, you had to face what was now visible. "We did it," Chris said. His voice was weary, but laced with hope. He stood in front of us, in a sunlit room, golden light streaming through the window. "This world will never be the same." I looked outside the window and saw a scene I'd only ever imagined in science fiction. The streets were packed, not just with people, but with energy. Heated debates, spontaneous gatherings, massive international conferences where scientists, politicians, and psychologists came together to discuss what we had uncovered. Small revolutions were happening everywhere, from protests supporting the disclosure to fierce debates about the future of humanity. But the shift wasn't just societal. The scientific community began to completely rethink its approach to the cosmos, to humanity, to history itself. Ancient monuments, the pyramids of Egypt, the Moai of Easter Island, the Nazca Lines were no longer just unexplained artifacts. They had become clues, traces of alien contact in our distant past. "There's something I've come to understand," I said, turning to Jack and Chris. "This truth doesn't just change how we see the universe. It changes how we see ourselves." Jack nodded. Exactly. If we're not alone in the universe, then what are we? How long have they been out there while we stayed unaware? And now, everything we once believed could be a lie. This wasn't just a revolution in knowledge. It was a complete disruption of our value systems. Countries began reshaping their policies. Some called for global cooperation in studying alien life. Others tried to protect national interests and maintain control over the flow of information. But we couldn't deny it. A historic turning point was happening. Humanity was standing at the threshold of a new world. The biggest questions about the universe, our existence, and our relationship with beings beyond Earth were finally being asked out loud. I thought about what Chris had said. We had done it, but this was only the beginning. We had opened a door, and now the world would have to figure out how to walk through it. So where do we go from here? Chris asked, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I smiled, gazing out the window at a world changing more and more each day. We don't stop, I said. The questions about aliens, the universe, our purpose, they're just beginning. And we'll keep walking this road together, discovering everything that's still out there. My eyes turned toward the future, a future without fear, without doubt. Everything would be uncovered, and the world would learn to live with the truth, even if it hurt, even if it meant loss. Because that's the road humanity must walk.